What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton just sent the most dangerous message to Max Verstappen without directly mentioning him, just when the Dutchman starts looking towards the Nürburgring? Subscribe to continue uploading more of this type of content now, if we continue. Because while everyone is talking about pace, testing, and what Verstappen can do outside of Formula One, Hamilton is building something much bigger, something that could completely change the balance of power in the new era. And the most shocking thing is not what he said, but what it really means. Hamilton did not need an explosive headline or a direct statement to start marking territory, because everything that is happening around him already speaks for him. We are at a key moment of transition in Formula One, where not only the cars of the future are being defined, but also who is truly prepared to dominate them. And this is where this message towards Verstappen begins to take shape. On the one hand, we have a Lewis Hamilton who has completely changed his narrative. He is no longer the driver who seemed to be in the final stretch of his career, nor the one who carried frustrations from past seasons. Now, he talks about restarting, about personal rediscovery, about remembering who he really is on the track. And this is not just empty talk, it is a clear construction of competitive identity for 2026. He is sending a signal to the entire paddock. He is still here, he is still dangerous, and most importantly, he is ready to adapt better than anyone to what is coming. Meanwhile, on the other side of the equation, Max Verstappen is starting to show a completely different approach. His statements about the cars of 2026 are not exactly enthusiastic. It talks about how unnatural energy management feels, how the essence of the flat-out is lost, and hints at a real discomfort with the direction the category is taking. But not only that, his growing interest in challenges outside of Formula One, such as the Nürburgring, begins to reinforce an idea that is already being discussed in the paddock. Max is not completely aligned with the future of F1. And this is where Hamilton plays his best card. Because while Verstappen projects doubts and diversification of focus, Hamilton projects total commitment. While one seems to question the path, the other embraces it, even with its flaws. And this, although it is not explicitly said, is a direct message. You may not like this new game, but I am going to master it. The most interesting thing is that Hamilton does not deny the problems of the new regulations. He recognizes them, criticizes them, but immediately transforms them into opportunities. It talks about closer races, better fights on the track, new dynamics that can favor the driver who best understands the system. It is a key mentality change. It's not about whether the car is perfect or not. It's about who knows how to exploit it best. And if Hamilton has shown anything throughout his career, it is precisely that adaptation. This first act is not about the Nürburgring as an isolated event. It is about what it represents. It's about how the context around Verstappen is beginning to open small cracks in his dominant narrative, and how Hamilton, with brutal competitive intelligence, is taking advantage of each of them to reposition himself. Because in the end, the message does not need to be said to be understood. Hamilton is not reacting to Verstappen, he is anticipating him. But this is where everything takes a much more interesting turn, because we are no longer just talking about speech, nor about narrative. We are talking about what is beginning to be perceived on and off the track, a silent reversal of psychological dominance between Hamilton and Verstappen. Until very recently, Formula One revolved around a very clear idea. Verstappen was the unbeatable driver, the one who had led Red Bull to an era of absolute dominance, the one who imposed the pace and forced the rest to react. But that scenario is no longer as solid as it seems. Red Bull is beginning to show cracks, internal changes, questioned decisions, and most importantly, an increasingly evident dependence on Max to sustain the team's performance. And just at that moment, Hamilton appears, not as a pursuer, but as someone who is rebuilding his position from a much more dangerous place. Because while Verstappen carries the pressure of maintaining an empire that is beginning to falter, Hamilton is operating from growth. His process with Ferrari, although imperfect, is showing something key: real capacity for adaptation. Even in complicated contexts, we have already seen how he modifies his driving style, how he adjusts his technique to get closer to the car's optimal performance, something that he did not do in his last stage at Mercedes, and that now he is willing to do. And this completely changes the equation. Because if Hamilton is once again that driver capable of reinventing himself, then we are no longer talking about nostalgia or legacy. We are talking about a direct threat. Now connect this with the Nürburgring and everything surrounding Verstappen. The Dutchman is not only exploring other territories, he is sending a signal, even if he is not conscious. He needs new stimuli, new challenges. And that, in a context of regulatory change as radical as that of 2026, can be a double-edged sword. Because while you divide your focus, another pilot may be completely specializing in the new scenario. And that driver is Hamilton. This is where the message becomes much more aggressive, although it is still without direct words. Hamilton is building a narrative of total focus, of absolute commitment to the new era, of renewed ambition, while Verstappen, for the first time in years, does not seem completely aligned with the path ahead. And in Formula One, those types of details change everything. Because great eras are not only defined by talent, they are defined by who comes best prepared for change. And what we are starting to see is disturbing for anyone who thought Verstappen's dominance was untouchable. Hamilton is not trying to recapture the past. He is preparing to take over the future. And then we reach the key point, the moment where this whole game of narrative, adaptation, and mentality begins to transform into a real threat. Because if you put all the pieces together, the picture is much clearer than it seems. Hamilton is no longer reacting. He is one step ahead. He has understood something that very few on the grid seem to be fully processing. The 2026 era is not going to reward only the fastest driver. It is going to reward the one who best understands change, the one who adapts the fastest, the one who turns limitations into advantage. And on that ground, Hamilton is beginning to build an extremely dangerous position. While Verstappen continues to be the absolute benchmark in pure performance, small signs that did not exist before are beginning to appear. Discomfort with the regulations, interest in projects outside of F1, an environment at Red Bull that is more unstable than usual, factors that, separately, mean nothing, but together they begin to draw a crack. And Hamilton is watching her. That's why his message is not impulsive, it is calculated. When he talks about being reset, when he insists that he has recovered his best version, when he recognizes the problems of the new regulations but still embraces the challenge, what he is really saying is much deeper. This new scenario does not scare me, it favors me. And this is where the contrast with Verstappen reaches its peak, because if Max represents perfection in the current system, Hamilton is beginning to emerge as the ideal driver for the coming system. And in Formula One, that is the most dangerous thing that can happen. Because dynasties don't end when a driver drops his level. They end when another appears who understands the next chapter better. This is not a direct confrontation, yet. There are no explosive statements, there are no frontal attacks, but the tension is already there. It is in every interview, in every nuance, in every decision. Hamilton does not need to challenge Verstappen openly, because what he is building is much more powerful, a silent threat that grows with each passing day. And if all this is confirmed when 2026 arrives, we will not be talking about a return. Because it's not just about Hamilton adapting better. It's that, for the first time in years, the entire context of Formula One could be aligning in his favor. Throughout the recent era, Verstappen has been the center of a perfect ecosystem. A dominant car, a team built entirely around him, and a stability that allowed him to fully exploit his talent. But that balance begins to change, slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it changes. Red Bull is no longer that unbreakable block. Internal decisions, pressure for results, changes in the lineup, everything begins to generate an environment that is less solid than it seemed. And in those types of scenarios, even the best driver in the world needs more than talent to sustain dominance. You need total control. And that's where Hamilton re-enters the picture with an advantage that few are considering. Because he's been there before. He has already experienced rule changes. He has already rebuilt teams from scratch. He has already gone from dominating to losing and dominating again. You have the experience of understanding when a cycle is ending, and more importantly, how to position yourself for the next one. This is not new to him. But for Verstappen, yes it is. And this is where the Nürburgring stops being simply a side interest and starts to be seen as a possible distraction at the worst possible time. Because while Max explores other challenges, Hamilton is completely focused on just one, Formula One, and its next big transformation. That difference in approach is critical. Because in an era where everything changes, technology, driving, energy management, and racing philosophy, the driver who invests the most time in understanding this new world will have a brutal advantage from the beginning. And Hamilton is investing absolutely everything in it. The most disturbing thing about all this is that there is no hurry in their movement. You don't need to win tomorrow, you don't need to prove anything immediately, because your goal is not the short term. It is the exact moment when everything restarts. And when that moment comes, the question will no longer be whether Hamilton can compete with Verstappen again. The real question will be if Verstappen is ready to face a Hamilton who's already figured out the new game before anyone else. Subscribe to continue uploading more of that content. Now you really think about all this.